Hello and welcome to Meal Mentor Live. Today we are going to interview Amy. I am Scott Nixon. I am the co-founder of Happy Herbivore and Meal Mentor, and we try to help you lose weight and eat healthy with our vegan meal plans. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she's going to introduce you and tell you how she got started. Go ahead, Amy.
Hi. Hi. I first came to the whole food plant-based lifestyle just because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had allergies and food intolerances basically my whole life. And then on Mother's Day in 2011, I basically just said, hey, there's no time like the present. And so I came home and then Googled and found Lindsay's blog and picked what I thought were two just easy recipes of things that I liked. I picked the black bean and salsa soup because I knew that was something that I would eat and my family would eat also, and the black bean brownies because they didn't sound too weird, and they were good. And my children, my son and my stepdaughter at the time, were 14 and 9, and so we just kind of went from there.
Cool. Very cool. So, I mean, that's incredible. 2011. I mean, that was before we even started the meal plans. Lindsay was, in 2011, maybe she'd written her second cookbook, but it wasn't actually published yet.
The Happy Herbivore cookbook was out, and that was when Everyday Happy Herbivore was being, I think, pre-released.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so she's got the little Herbie necklace, so that's really old school right there. Yeah, back in the day. So. Yeah, that was like 2012, I think, whenever we sold those. So that's a long time. So long time. Wow. And what I think is interesting is that you like immediately, just like one day, you just like switched to it and just like committed to it and have never turned back. I think that's really fascinating. What was it? What was the single kind of thing that kind of drove that, or what was kind of the lead up to why you decided to do that?
Well, I've always been lactose intolerant, and I also with red meat, I always would get sick when I ate red meat, and that kind of so I really I'm allergic to seafood, so a lot of the things I couldn't really eat anyways. So and I'm one of these people that it's I don't want to say all or nothing, but I have clinical OCD, so it's kind of with structure and rigidity. It's to where it's like if I see that it's this or nothing, to where it's very easy for me to abstain from something, and if something makes me sick, I'm not going to keep eating it.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of like I said, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And I really kind of felt that, I remember once, saying, that I felt like food hated me.
Oh.
And that it was just so sad. Cause that, also, I just mentioned, the clinical OCD. I also have PTSD, and I struggle with depression, or I'm managing depression. But it was just it's really hard because so many people use food as comfort. But when you turn to food for comfort and it just literally is making you sick, when I went and started trying different foods, and it was like, hey, wait a minute, this is making me feel better. And I was in my early 30s when, which I'm 42 now, and I had, in 2011, it was May of 2011, I was getting ready to have another surgery, and that was the thing. It was kind of like I had all these medical issues, and it was just so frustrating because I was like, I'm in my 30s. Why are there so many things that the doctors kind of can't say what's wrong? They're like, oh, it must be this. And, I remember kind of seeing, once I kind of started getting into veganism, that, it was the let food be thy medicine. And I just really grasped onto that. And it was like, and it was kind of that everybody kept saying, well, you're a picky eater. And it was like, well, I'm not. It's just I hadn't really tried things that I liked, and then it was like, well, wait a minute, I do like this. And one of the funniest things I remember happening is when I would start thinking about greens, like spinach and collards, and which being from the South, collard greens and Brussels sprouts, and that my mouth would start to water, and it was like, who am I? Who did I become? And one of the things that my husband and I, there was this talk show once, and there was like, can't have broccoli without cheese, and that was such a Southern thing, that you have to put cheese on everything, and I remember, it's one of the, I think all vegans or all people that are plant based is, everybody always says, well, I can't give up cheese, and I for me, again, being lactose intolerant, it was just like, oh my gosh, please don't make me eat cheese because I'm going to have this horrible digestive, distress. But I remember, kind of that macaroni and cheese, which then, realizing I was celiac because I would, it was like macaroni and cheese was like the trifecta, like pizza. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so sick after eating that. Which now I'm like, okay, I don't remember what the original question was.
No, yeah, it's good. It's funny because you transition right into the celiac stuff and how that's a struggle. Because we definitely have a lot of people that have intolerance, maybe not to the level of celiac, but that's a big challenge for a lot of people. So, I guess one of my questions to you would be like, what are some of the tips, or what would you suggest to people who are, trying to incorporate or take some of the, the grains out of their diet, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I think if you suspect that you have, that if you're gluten intolerant, if you're gluten sensitive, or if you may be celiac, it's first, of course, you need to eliminate and determine and have yourself tested. I did elimination first, and then, you have to be your own advocate because, if you aren't your own advocate, your doctors are content to just say, well, it's IBS, it's this or it's that, and just let you be miserable. No one else cares as much about your health as you, period, and it doesn't matter what it is. I am my own advocate, whether it's my teeth, my skin, or whatever part of my body, or anything. Mm-hmm. So I had every test to where it was finally endoscopy and DNA that diagnosed my celiac disease. And so in terms of how oh gosh, yeah. And I am extremely sensitive when it comes to cross-contamination, and I'm also intolerant to oats and corn. So I can't have even the gluten-free oats or any corn products. So it makes things really interesting here in my house. My son is not, he's never been tested, but he does eat, we'll just let the...
Don't worry about it.
Don't get that. Yeah, it's probably a telemarketer anyways. Or my mom saying, hey, look, Amy's on Facebook. Which reminds me, hi, Dorothy Sue, if you're watching. That's for my 4-year-old niece.
No, absolutely.
Yes, but, so yeah, my son, he is lactose intolerant, but he does still eat things like ice cream or pizza. He's 21, so I can't tell him what to do. But he at home he does. Okay, let me stick to celiac. One of the things I do have, I do eat brown rice and sometimes the brown rice tortillas, which the brown rice pastas. But I try not to eat. I don't eat them often. And if I do eat like a brown rice pasta or like a brown rice tortilla, I only do like one a day because it is very difficult for me to digest. I prefer potatoes. And when it comes to like the recipes, hands down, anything over potato. Zucchini is a great spiralizing the zucchini, anything you can make into a noodle, cauliflower, doing like the cauliflower rice, you can always pulse it in your processor or
Sure.
just or don't. I know with like the different blueprints that just came out, Lindsay did a lot of the substitutions and things like that. So like for me personally, on the blueprints, they were great because I have to swap so many ingredients out because there are things that I can't have. So because there were things that I know for people that have IBS that may not be celiac or gluten sensitive that have it, or FODMAP. I know that that's an issue too. I think those blueprints, even if you're not trying to lose weight, that there are issues that people like me or that have other issues, that those plans worked really well for issues like that. Now my husband or my son recently moved back in, they neither one of them have the allergies or the sensitivities that I have, but yet I love them so much that they are very, very sensitive to the fact that my cross-contamination issues. So we do have a gluten-free house. My son's room is now down in the basement. And so we have a refrigerator down there. And so if he does bring something that is not vegan or that isn't gluten-free, he doesn't bring it up here into the kitchen.
I like that physical separation. That's a really smart way to handle that.
Yeah, because since my surgery in 2016 and me having the flu twice this year, it's just my system has just not been quite the same. Mm-hmm. And my husband, he because I've been vegan since 2011, and he or whole food plant-based, and he became whole food plant-based in 2013.
Okay, awesome. Wow, yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So I want to just stop really quickly and be like, if you guys are enjoying this interview, thumbs up it, heart it, ask questions if you feel like it. While the most important part of these interviews is that we get everybody's personal experiences and we share, because there are certainly other people out there that have intolerances and serious allergies and have this experience where they don't understand why they feel bad, and that it's just a long journey to figure out that food, that connection to food making them not feel good. And it's not even just like you could be eating very healthy, in a very good way, and that food is still maybe bad for you because maybe something has gluten in it and you just don't know and it messes you up, or broccoli, that's obviously something that Lindsay has issues with, is if it ends up in a veggie burger or something like that, then you don't know that those things are there, and so it's a struggle, and so you have to be vigilant, unfortunately. And so I think it's good for everybody to hear those different experiences and how you kind of manage that. So I know you just mentioned your husband transitioning, so can you tell me a little bit about how you helped him with that, and maybe anything he struggled with? And
actually, when Brian transitioned, he actually just went, well, I can't say, I want to give him credit and say he went cold turkey, but because I had already been plant-based for 2 years, or a little over 2 years, and so he had already been eating plant-based at home. And so the only time that, because when I decided, hey, this is what I'm doing, and because I am very headstrong, and this is what I'm doing, and I won't say and if you guys don't like it, tough, but it was this is what I'm doing, and if you guys want meat and cheese, then fine. I'm just not going to touch it or cook it or buy it. So if you want it, you add it. And so he was like, okay, cool. All right. Then I guess, and at the time he was federal government, because we live outside of DC. And, so yeah, I guess, and like I said, the kids were 14 and 9. And, so yeah, it wasn't like anybody else is going to be preparing it. So I was like, awesome. Everybody's just going to eat what I make. And they did. And, obviously, kids would eat whatever outside of the house. And my stepdaughter was only here, every other weekend. And, so yeah. And
yeah. So
yes, and obviously if we ate out at restaurants, people got whatever they wanted. And so yeah, when Brian, when he, in 2013, and so that, he said, okay, I see how difficult this is, because that was after I had my celiac diagnosis. And he said, I really want to feel what it's like for you, because he was like, wow, now that with your allergies and this, and he was like, wow, and now with the bread. And I just recently, I had to see a cardiologist because of some heart stuff. And so we found out I may have to give up coffee. And so, I was like, really, I can't have coffee. And so we don't know for sure yet, because I only have the one. I only have like the one a day. And so it's like any time that we find out, like there's like one more thing, because it was like when I couldn't have like corn tortillas, and it was like, and then I was like, well, corn's not good for you anyways. So yeah, it's like, but then it's like, come on. It's like, really? It's like coffee. It's like, that's my one thing. And so now, now I'm like, okay, fingers crossed, nothing happens with soy. But it's like, and so then we look at, like one of the things that I love, that Lindsay had talked about several years back on the podcast, was looking at the flip side of deprivation. And, so when that whole thing came up with the coffee, and I said, well, what would I rather have? My 1 cup of coffee or a long, healthy life, so that I can have, my life with him and all the things that we want to do, or, that cup of coffee, but live a shorter, unhealthy life. And it's like, okay, done. Just, I'm going to, get out of my pity party. And so, and it's like,
yeah,
then,
no, it's totally difficult to give things up, and especially things that you're really invested in. And it's one of the conversations that I repeat back to a lot of people most often about if somebody came to you and said you have to give up yellow squash, you might be like, oh, that sucks. It's not a big deal.
But I can't have green.
But it's like you tell somebody they can't have coffee or chocolate, and they're like, it's like, I can't do that, and it's like,
but you have to grieve it. Yeah, you have to sit there and say, okay, let me feel this, let me grieve it, so that I can move on. And it's, it's a process. And I remember back in Slim Team, we talked about you have to feel the feelings. But with Brian, when he first, was doing, when he first came, it was part of a fasting thing. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And then he just kept with it. And he's never looked back, and he's done really well. Now he struggles with sweets. And because I think for him, we both have had issues with emotional eating and overeating. And I think that's something everybody does, to where it's like, I won't say like, oh, well, that's his thing or that's my thing. He's definitely a sweets person, to where I'm like, oh, potato chips, French fries. But yeah, he's a sweet person, or he's like the, hey, Brian is a pilot. He was hired last year because I've mentioned he was previously a federal government worker, and I can say that he now for the last year he's a commercial pilot, and so when we saw you guys last year, he had just had his interview. And so that was a big thing, to where then when he was hired, then he was like, let's go celebrate. Let's go out to eat. And, eating out is a hard thing for me because of the cross-contamination, because not everybody understands, so you might find somewhere that has vegan, but then it's, do they understand gluten-free? Because unless it's a completely 100% gluten-free, then it's, there's cross-contamination. So it's difficult. But yeah, Brian wants to celebrate with food because he sees it as, well, let me treat you by you not having to cook. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna poison me. And so, it's hard. It really is hard, because he sees it as his love language is, I want to spoil you by you not cooking. And I'm like, no, my food is safe. Mm-hmm. So it's hard.
Yeah. It really creates an interesting dynamic, because his experience with food is very different from your experience with food, and so his response to those things are very different. So it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, so, and we're like, let's go get coffee, and I'm like, oh no.
So I want to go back to a point you made, because I think it's a really interesting thing. And you had talked about making at one point, both your son and Brian had said that they were, oh, we'll just eat what you eat, and you're like, oh, that'd be so much easier. And it's like, that's one of the things, is that like literally the inertia of life, where people just like come home, and if somebody's made them food, most people will just sit down and eat it. And if they don't eat it, maybe then if they have to fend for themselves, they're just much more likely to just eat what you eat, or add something on top of what you've already made, or there's just so many ways to kind of attack that. Like once you have food there, then you can be like, oh, well, husband or son or whatever, just add these little things onto it. And yeah, it's you can use that to your advantage. If you're the one doing the cooking and stuff, you can use that to your advantage. So
yeah. Oh yeah. One thing that I really loved with I will say, like with this with the first blueprint, the first one that came out, not the bikini blueprint, but the one right before it. The shortcut to slim blueprint. My son had just moved back in because it was the end of April. The shortcuts that were on that one, I had had a few servings of, because my son used to always before he moved, because he had moved out for like a year and a half, and he used to always steal my portions. But when he moved back in, I had some servings of the black bean soup. And so he was like, hey, do you have anything to eat? And I was like, yeah. And so he ate all of my portions of the black bean soup. But with the shortcut, the SOS instructions on there, and I had told Lindsay this, but he was like, and so I showed him how he could make his own portions with that. And so he started making his own of that, to where now he's like, oh, and he's done all these variations to where, because I had printed out that whole plan, and I leave it sitting out on the counter next to the refrigerator. And so and Brian does it too when he's traveling. But yeah, so it's changed to where now it's I don't have to do as much for him, because also with the fact that he lived on his own, but he makes, but that's his favorite thing now, is that he makes is that black bean soup from the blueprint, with the shortcut, not the having to stovetop cook it, but to where I was like, oh, this is so great that he does that.
Yeah.
And still of the other ones, but it's I'm like, oh, I don't have to do this as much, because it's huge. It's that feeling that responsibility and accountability that he has now for himself, that hey, I made this.
Yeah, the more effort that it takes to make something, that makes you the more likely. Yeah, you're just and then the interesting thing too is also, it's once you've done it once, now you feel oh, it's not so hard, so I can do it again. And so some of this, it's almost I think it's important to just have somebody like cook with you, or maybe have them help you, and then it's like, oh, they see that it's not that difficult, and especially with like that's a big part of the Meal Mentor recipes.
Well, I couldn't make fresh ingredient meals at 21.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. You're like, oh, I don't know how to cut things, and I don't know how to
I could not chop an onion at 21, and my mom would tell you that. Yeah. Although I don't want her chiming in on what I could or couldn't do at 21.
That's funny. Yeah. I think I had done some baking.
We'll delete those comments. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had done some baking as a kid, but not nothing too crazy. So to try to get us towards a little more towards wrapping up, what I want to know is if somebody's just getting started today, what would you what would be kind of your paragraph or whatever, your really quick advice to them?
Focus on one thing. Don't. Keep it simple. Don't try to do too much, and do not compare yourself to anyone else. Your journey is not going to look like anyone else's. I think those are probably the most important.
Okay.
One meal at a time.
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that one. I remember somebody saying that several years back. I think that was in 2016 during Slim Team, and it was just so good. And I was like, yeah. But I was like, oh, I wish I'd had that when I started.
Yeah.
Because it's everything is just one step at a time, one meal at a time, and it's it doesn't have to be perfect. And there was also something. Marianne, who was she was in Slim Team, but she had said in our little shortcut group last night, or a few days ago, but that it was talking about how, weight and that, but and I had it kind of made me think, and but not all the weight that we carry is physical. So much of our weight is emotional, and tying back to something I said earlier, that with OCD, it's an overwhelming sense of responsibility, and it's the burdens, and so it's like, focus on yourself and take care of you. And so it's like, when you're focusing on that meal, it's the, what is your goal? And it's like, don't try to be perfect. It's, Lindsay talks about progress, not perfection. So it's like, it's zeroing in on that thing. It's like, what is your goal? So, and I probably just kind of lost everybody right there.
No.
But yeah, it's just kind of that, what are you trying to do? So it's like, don't try to eliminate, don't try to add too many things, because like with resolutions, everybody's like, I'm going to do this, and don't try to add things. Just kind of remove one thing at a time.
Exactly.
And then you'll get where you're going, but just kind of take one step at a time, one meal at a time. So
that's wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I know that these interviews are important because it's about hearing people's story. It's about hearing how they overcame these things, what their family dynamic is, and how they deal with all those things. And so it's really fascinating to get to hear your you talk about the allergies and the celiacs, and dealing with all the gluten issues, and then how you incorporate it and get your son and kind of balance all that. I mean, that stuff is hugely valuable, and I know everybody appreciates it, because we're already at like 47 thumbs up, so we want more of that. I got 9 loves, 9 hearts, and all that. So that stuff is great. Not many questions, but these things don't normally have a lot of questions. I'm always looking to improve the format, but you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I know everybody's going to get a ton of value out of this. And if you're just new to Meal Mentor and Happy Herbivore, if you go to happyherbivore.com, we blog pretty regularly. We have lots of great information. If you're interested in meal plans, go to getmealplans.com and download the free sample meal plan, and we'll be here for you. And we've got a great community. Once you become a Meal Mentor member, there's this very active discussion group that you can get in there and ask questions and get help, and kind of share your own personal stories and struggles as things happen. So thank you again, Amy, for being here. We really appreciated this, and it's been great to have this discussion with you today. So have a great day. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.